the River Trading Post Pod Network. Here we'll bring you interesting tips, tidbits, information, discussions, and music, and just about everything else of interest to collectors of fine Native American art. The River Trading Post Pod Network is brought to you by River Trading Post. Be sure to drop in and visit with us in Santa Fe, Scottsdale, or Chicagoland. And of course, you can visit with us anytime at rivertradingpost.com.
Welcome to another look at the world of art in the city of Scottsdale. I'm your host, Diane Bykowski, and this is Scottsdale Art Beat. In the past, we have visited with a number of painters, have visited the Scottsdale Artist School, and taken a closer look at the public art in the city of Scottsdale. But we have seldom touched on the world of sculpture. Today is different. With me is my guest, sculptor Cliff Fragua from New Mexico. Today we will look at the process of his art, how he turns a piece of stone into a piece of beautiful art, as well as what life is like on a pueblo. Welcome to Scottsdale Art Beat, Cliff.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk first about this piece that you're creating right here.
This sculpture here is made of clay, and it's part of a series of shawl dancers, and they will ultimately be cast in bronze and offered as a series in a limited edition.
So you work in bronze as well as stone?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
But did you always start out that way?
No, actually, I started out as a painter.
Okay.
And I've always felt that I had some artistic talent ever since I was a child. And then I attended school, art school, San Francisco Art Institute, as well as the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. And it was during my second year in Santa Fe that I discovered sculpture.
Are there any artists in your family?
Oh yeah, I come from a family of potters. My mother is a potter, and she learned the tradition from her mother, mm-hmm. and then my grandmother from her mother.
So the Native American traditions have been passed on?
Yes, and there's 5 generations of potter in my family.
Do you also work at Indian Market that they have in Santa Fe? Do you have things there?
Yes, I'm an exhibitor there as well as a volunteer. I've mm-hmm. also served on the Southwestern Association of Indian Arts as a board member, as well as committee members.
And how long have you had your work here in Scottsdale?
Oh, I've been coming to Scottsdale for years. Ever since I first started carving stone, I had heard that Scottsdale was a great area to market the work. So
let's talk a little bit how you choose the stone. Does the stone choose you? Do you choose the stone? Do you think of the piece first? What's the process?
Well, let me go back to my first experience with stone.
Okay.
I attended the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I was rooming with a friend of mine who was from Canada, and he took sculpture first, and then when he completed his first sculpture, he brought it to me and he showed it to me, and I was just blown away by what he did. So I promised myself that I was going to take sculpture the following semester, and I did. And at that time, Alan Hauser was the teacher mm-hmm. at the institute, so I was fortunate to be able to take his class.
Would you say he was one of your mentors as far as that goes?
Yes, he had a great influence on my work, and not only was he a teacher, but him and I had developed a relationship where it was more like an uncle-nephew mm-hmm. kind of thing, and it was real special. But anyway, when I took the very first stone that I was going to carve, I had this grand illusion of what it was going to be, and I started working on it. And during the first hour, I was working on the stone. It broke in half.
Oh, so that ended that piece.
Right.
How large of a piece was that going to be?
It was going to be probably about 18, 20 inches tall.
Okay.
I was going to astound the art market, the art world. But anyway, at that time, I didn't know it, but it was a stone that was giving me a lesson. So in a way, it was a stone that chose me.
I see.
And now I have this relationship with stone, the spirit of the stone. In my culture, you know, we see that all things here on earth have a spirit. So I communicate with the stone.
I read in your biography, I think, or maybe it was your artist statement, where you knock on the stone and it sings to you?
Yes, it does. Whenever I select stone, I like to tap it to see if it rings. If it rings, then the stone is pretty solid. And I interpret that ringing as the stone singing to me. And hence that's the name of my studio, Singing Stone Studio.
So all of that ties together that way.
Yes, and I love stone. It's my passion. That's foremost, and I think that's what my purpose here on
Let's say you
Earth
have
is.
a piece of stone in front of you. You've already knocked on it, and you know it's solid. Do you have the vision in your head as to what that is going to become, or as you chip away, I guess that would be the right term, as you carve away from it, does it start appearing as something, or do you have the vision of what it's going to be first?
It's both. I mean, there's many approaches to stone, and each one is different. I like to do the direct carving approach, which is just to carve into the stone. And generally, you know, I look at the shape, and then I would have a vision of what it would be. But it's not always that case, because as I'm working, sometimes the stone wants to be something else. And so rather than think of that as a mistake or failure, it's another opportunity to improvise and help create what the stone wants to be.
So I like what you just said, what the stone wants to be, because that's that spirit of that stone coming out again.
Exactly, yes.
I noticed that a number of your pieces are women. Is that a special significance to you in some way?
Well, yeah, they're at the Pueblo, among Pueblo people as well as most native groups. They're matrilineal societies. So our clanship comes down from the mother side, and so we honor, you know, the women of our community, and without, you know, that without honoring that, you know, I think that we will have a much harder time being a community. So we follow our mother's clan. My mother comes from the Cornstalk people, and her mother Cornstalk, and then it makes all of her children Cornstalk people.
So, well, that's interesting. Now, some of their faces seem similar to me. Do you have a particular woman in mind on some of these pieces that you have created?
Actually, the woman comes from the stone itself. I mean, it's the energy that I feel that I take from the stone, and I take away everything that isn't supposed to be there. And what emerges is that personality.
To me, that seems so difficult. I'm a painter, and so I just keep adding things, and you have to keep taking things away. That would seem much more difficult to me.
Yeah, well, with stone, with sculpture, you displace space, you manipulate it, you shift it around, and with paintings, you create illusions. But with stone and with clay, what you're doing is you're turning, you know, an object, and you're positioning it in this space, and being able to do that, you know, you can do just about anything you want. I know that with stone, I use all types of tools to achieve a certain effect, and sometimes it doesn't always work out, but then, you know, it's always a learning process.
Now, some of your pieces are huge. So where do you get a stone that large?
Well, you look at a mountain. Yeah.
And do you hire someone to go get this piece out of a mountain?
Well, yeah, I rely on quarries to extract the pieces. I've purchased stone from quarries out in Italy. I rely on stone dealers that are here in the United States. I've been to Italy before, and
Do you have any favorites that you like to work with better than others?
well, there's certain stones that tend to be much more carvable than others. I love carving marble, and whether it's Italian marble or Tennessee marble, Portuguese marble, it's all the same. I mean, there's some degree of variations, like some marble have larger crystals, others are smaller, finer crystals. And but it's the color, I think, that really attracts.
Now, you've been carving for about 30-some years now, right? Would that be about right?
Yeah, 33 years.
So in the carvings that you have done, are there any favorites that you could say, you know, I really like this one better than the rest?
Actually,
That's a difficult question.
yes, it is. It's like you're asking me, you know.
Do you have a favorite child?
Exactly. And, you know, I think my purpose is to help raise the child or raise the stone and help it to emerge from within, and then help it to find a home.
Now, do you work on commissions primarily now, or do you still enter exhibitions for sculptors? What's the process that you go through at this point in your career?
I work in art shows. I attend art shows. I do accept commissions. Sometimes I'll apply or send proposals. I also
For
work
public
with,
art type
yes,
things?
for public art, as well as work with galleries throughout the country.
Now, you have a piece in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, I do. I was commissioned by the state of New Mexico to carve a sculpture of Pope A.
And who's that?
He's the leader of the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, and New Mexico was honoring his contribution to the history of New Mexico. And through a competition, I won the award, and I proceeded to go ahead and carve the stone, which was a 7.5-ton block of Tennessee marble.
Oh my.
And the sculpture itself stands 7 feet tall, and it currently now weighs 2 tons. So I've knocked away 5.5 tons of stone.
Now, when you knock away 5.5 tons of stone, can anything be salvaged from that, or is that all waste?
Oh yeah, no, it's not all waste. Even if it's little chips in it, I still don't consider it waste, because there's Zuni fetish carvers that would come to my studio and ask if they can take any of my scraps.
So then they can create some small pieces of art from that. So everything is recyclable.
Exactly, yeah.
So what came from the earth is returning in some way, in some form of beauty.
Yes.
You have something in the Phoenix City Hall here?
Yes, I do. I was working with an organization back in the, I think it was about the mid-'80s, and they were instrumental in getting public art into some of the city centers. And so I was able to get a sculpture through this program into City Hall.
And what about museums?
Well, I have works in the Albuquerque Museum, as well as the San Diego Museum of Man. I do have public works in the National Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C., which is Pope
So you're quite famous.
Yeah, famous Amos.
I guess I have to touch you, you know, you're a real famous person. Maquettes, I think I saw something about that on your website, or maybe I'm not pronouncing it right. What is that?
Well, maquette's just a fancy word for models.
Oh, okay. It costs more too, right? When it's a maquette instead of a model. Now, your work here in Scottsdale rather, is at the River Trading Post?
Yes, it is.
And how many pieces do you have here?
Oh, well, I have continuous works here at River Trading Post.
And how long have you been exhibiting here?
I've been with the gallery since it first opened, which was about 8 years ago in Chicago. Well, actually, East Dundee, west of Chicago. And then about 6 years ago, they opened the gallery here in
Do they still
Scottsdale.
have their gallery in Dundee?
Yes, they do. And then about 4 years ago, they opened another gallery in Santa Fe. So I've been dedicating a lot of my time and efforts working with River Trading Post.
So do you have pieces in all three galleries now?
Yes, I do. Hmm.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah. But I still attend arts and crafts shows as well as work with other galleries.
Well, that's nice that you can have that versatility, and then people get to know you and get to know your work. How did you go from stone to bronze? Or I think it was that order, right?
Yes, it went from stone to bronze. Bronze was it was an opportunity to market my work.
Okay, and expand in another direction.
Yes, exactly. And so I worked with a publisher back about almost 10 years ago, and we were together for some time, and we would just take a mold of stone originals and then have them cast in bronze. But recently, I started working in clay. Last year, I was commissioned by the Sandoval County Vietnam Veterans Association to do a sculpture of a Vietnam soldier, and honoring his friend's death. And so I worked with with clay. It was a small model maquette, which was 20 inches tall, and then I took the maquette to the foundry in Prescott Valley, which is bronzesmith, and then they enlarged it up to 6.5 feet tall.
Oh,
Yeah, and so they did 8% of the enlargement, and then I finished off about the 20%, and did all the details. And fortunately, a couple of the employees that were working at the foundry were Vietnam vets, so
they really appreciated the beauty behind that piece, I'm
yes,
sure.
and they helped me as far as like some of the equipment
And the details that needed to be on there that you might not have been familiar with.
right.
Let's talk a little bit about this piece that you're creating right here. The process that you go through here. How did this all start out? Because it looks quite finished to me, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, I still got a little bit more to work on. Part of the accessories, as well as the leggings and moccasins that she'll be wearing. But with stone carving, it's a whole different process. It's subtractive. You take away everything.
Right.
But with clay, it's an additive process where you just build up, you add on to create your image.
And what do you, I noticed there's some type of armature under here, I'm sure. What's that created out of?
It's mostly created out of aluminum, and it's very pliable, so you can manipulate the limbs to whatever position you like it to
There's
be.
a piece behind us that maybe we can look at. It looks like you're starting with something there. We'll look at that a little bit later.
Yes.
So is that the same thing that this started with?
Yes.
And then you just keep adding to it.
The armature is there for support because the clay does get heavy, and the support will keep the sculpture stabilized, so that way you can be able to create your details without.
Now this beautiful cloak that this woman is wearing, I'm not going to lift this up obviously, but is this hollow underneath?
Yes, yeah, to some extent.
And is there something underneath this clay holding it up as well to keep that cloak from collapsing?
I use a aluminum screen.
Okay.
Yeah, and I try to use as much support as I can because although the clay is a much more firmer grade, it just can't support its own self.
And when you're adding to it, like you've added this feather on top of her head, what do you use to secure one piece of clay to another piece?
Well, I use like straight pins.
Oh, okay, very artistic there. So, yeah, in fact, I can actually see the little straight pin holding that in place.
Yes, and sometimes I'll use wire like on the braids. I have a wire right in the center, and then I have a straight pin.
And then you just build
holding
right
the tip.
around that.
Yes,
Once this is all finished with as much detail as you want on it, what happens then?
Well, I take it to the foundry, and then the foundry will go ahead and take a mold of it, and then proceed to go ahead and have it cast in bronze through the lost wax process.
Okay, where everything is burned away, and then you have this piece left.
Yes, and then this will be part of this Shawl Dancer series.
How many will be in this series? Do you know yet?
It'll be 4. I've already completed the first 2. This is number 3, and each of the shawl dancers will represent a season.
Okay.
So I've completed spring and summer. Now I'm working on autumn, and then the last one will be, of course,
And how
winter.
many of each piece will be in? Like, how many of spring will be produced? Do you
There'll
know?
be 18 in the
18.
additions.
And then will the mold be broken at that point?
Yes, it will be. Yeah.
Does that bother you when that happens?
No, because I'll be keeping a proof, an artist proof.
Oh, you will?
Yes, and then so ultimately I can go ahead and take the clay from this piece and then just
Start over again.
start all over
So there's
again.
no waste in there either.
Yes, but I mean I've taken so long to do this.
That's right. You just
Yeah.
keep right on going.
Right. There's more clay to buy and work with, so I'll just leave it the way it is.
Well, why don't we take a look at some of the pieces that are here in the gallery?
Certainly.
So, Cliff, what's the first piece we're going to look at?
We're going to look at a sculpture that I did back in 1997, and it's titled The Potter. It's a sculpture that honors my grandmother, who was a potter.
Does it actually look a little bit like your grandma, too?
Actually, no, it doesn't. In fact, my grandmother was very short, but I wanted to convey,
The essence of that feel of that woman?
Yes, She was a very hard worker all her life. She lived to be 94 years old, but she taught my mother as well as my mother's sisters how to do pottery.
And this pot that she's holding in her hand, is that a typical design from your tribe?
It's more of a design that's used throughout the Pueblo.
Okay, and what does she
culture.
have on her back?
Well, she's wearing the traditional Pueblo attire, but she has her hair wrapped up in a bun, and then it's wrapped with a sash.
Kind of like yours is.
Yeah, So this is a traditional hairstyle among the Pueblo people.
Cliff, this has so many different textures in it. The sleeve of her garment here, is that what the stone naturally would look like before you start polishing it?
No, actually, the stone would look like any stone that you would find.
I wouldn't even recognize it then.
Yeah, right. See,
So you've done something to make it look this white, bumpy texture.
yes, basically what I did was I pulverized the surface of the stone, and through the pulverizing, it bruises it and creates this white effect. The gray areas are just what I achieved through filing with steel rifflers. And then, but this on the face is actually the color of the stone. And
Okay, so if we saw a natural big chunk of this, it would look like this kind of coloring right here. Sort of?
Sort of. Well, not really. I think what you would see naturally would be more like landscaping stone.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've really transformed it and created it into something so beautiful.
That's the beauty of stone, because you don't know what's going to be inside stone until you work
It's
it.
kind of like magic.
Right.
So let's go see another piece now.
Okay.
Cliff, the second piece we're looking at is absolutely stunning. But the style is so different from the one we just looked at.
Yes. Well, I work in many different styles. I'm very diverse. I don't like to stick with one style. I mean, I like to explore it, but as an artist, you want to,
try different things.
See how far you can go.
Now, is anything traditional about this piece that we're looking at right now?
Well, it's titled Ancestor Song, and it was originally a stone, but I had a mold made from that stone, and it's an edition of 20, and it's now cast in bronze.
Can I turn her?
Oh, yes, please. And there's some elements of Pueblo culture. It actually is a Pueblo sculpture. The headdress here is what the women of our tribe wears, and the headdress symbolizes clouds. So when you have the headdress with the long hair represents the rain. So it's
how
the
beautiful.
rain coming down from the clouds. She's wearing a necklace, and most of my sculpture that are done of women wear necklaces. And the necklace represents the beauty of our soul. And then with the necklace, it has a shell, which represent where life began. You have motifs here around the shoulder in this band. And that symbolizes our songs and ceremonies of our culture. This here is a pot that's inside this swirl here, and it represents our traditions.
Now, the colors that are on here, these are patinas that are put on after the pieces comes from the foundry, and you're doing all of the different textures and things?
Yes. I work with Bronzesmith in Prescott Valley, and they have a wonderful palette of patinas that I choose from.
I noticed her hair is short in the front and then long in the back. Is that a traditional style, or is that
Yes.
something that you've taken artistic license with?
No, it's a traditional style.
It's beautiful.
My grandmother used to have her hair like that.
And the piece that we just looked at, the woman's hair is that
Yes.
way as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just love this, and I'm sure our viewers will too. Let's take another trip to another piece.
Okay.
Cliff, this last piece that we're looking at, what's the title of this?
It's titled Heart of the Basket Maker, and it's a bronze, and it comes in an edition of 30. It also started out as a stone original, and the stone original itself is out of alabaster.
And how large is the stone?
The stone is about the same size. Yes, And once again, it has the headdress, which is
similar to the other.
Yes,
we looked
and
at.
it's called a tablita. And in fact, tablita is the name of my youngest daughter.
Oh, how beautiful!
And so once again, it encompasses the different elements of our culture, the necklace, as well as the Pueblo attire, and then the sculpture swirls around, and then you have the vessel here, which is the basket. And then on the back side, we have once again the tablita, which represents the clouds, and then the long hair, which represents the rain. And I love this piece, and in fact, this sculpture will be enlarged 8 foot tall.
Oh my!
And it'll be installed in Schaumburg, Illinois. It won a commission, which the city
purchased, and you were commissioned to do that piece for
Yes.
them.
Mm-hmm.
How wonderful!
Yes, and then we'll have it installed sometimes in October this year.
Of this year?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, if anybody's out in Illinois, they need to go and see that.
Oh, absolutely.
Cliff, thank you so much for joining me on Scottsdale Art Beat.
Well, thanks for
It was
inviting
a
me.
pleasure seeing you, seeing your beautiful work, and you sharing your heritage with us as well. And thank you too for joining us. I'm Diane Bykowski, and this is Scottsdale Art Beat. And remember, keep art alive.
You have been listening to a presentation of the River Trading Post Pod Network. Join us again for tips, tidbits, information, discussions, and music, and just about everything else of interest to collectors of Native American art. The River Trading Post Pod Network is brought to you by River Trading Post. If you ever get the chance, drop in and visit with us in Santa Fe, Scottsdale, or Chicagoland. And of course, you can visit us anytime at rivertradingpost.com.